Okay, I think we are rolling.
It looks like we're going.
Very good.
The top of my screen says Eric is recording the call.
So you are informed of the fact that this call is being recorded, as we are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone.
They're all watching this.
Live. This is Eric McCool, and I have finally, after a little bit of working through difficulties, we have got a live connection with William Kötke. So I talked about him on my last video, and I'm going to have a conversation with him now, just so y'all know. William is the author of this book. This is a book that changed my life. It sort of set me on the course for trying to get prepared for the eventual collapse of our current society and the transition into something new. And Bill's going to talk about that. How are you doing today, Bill?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. The sun is shining now, and I've got my lab cat here, as you can see, and everything's fine.
Well, good. Glad that you're keeping it together out there in the mountains of Southern Oregon. And I wanted to talk with you on this program today because of the fact that your book was so instrumental in helping me to understand the risk we were in as a society of various types of collapse. And I am just curious about your opinion about what's going on now. A lot of people are asking me, is this the big collapse that we've all been worried about? And I'd like to see what you think about everything that's going on with both the virus and the government response to it. So tell us a little bit about how you feel about everything.
Well, Eric, I want to broaden the scope of our view here.
Okay.
We're dealing with a very serious situation, and this involves the entire species as well as the ecosystems. What we're involved with is 7 billion civilized people, not including the Amazonian tribes, but the 7 billion civilized people whose basic subconscious belief is that infinite growth can occur in a finite context, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the basis. That's the basis of our perception of reality that we live in. That's what we're trapped in. Obviously, there cannot be infinite growth, but due to the fact that 7 billion people want more, we're going to push it to the end. And that means the fish in the ocean, the trees on the land, the topsoil, the whole works. That we're going to push it to the end because that's the basic assumption of our culture on a subconscious basis. That's how serious this is. Now, it's not going to stop until it blows up, till we run out of topsoil, we run out of fish, etc. So what we're involved in is a trick that occurred when the forager hunters, we went 200,000 years as forager hunters, living in balance with the natural world. Now what we have, when agriculture began, what occurred was the humans discovered or decided to begin to extort the fertility of the earth. Now, once agriculture got rolling, where they could use the planting of plants and the grazing of animals, then they pushed it to the limit. And as that, all of those extractions of fertility are surpluses. Those surpluses then were used to build the imperial society, the hierarchical society, the Babylon. That's how it came about, was that the energy of the earth was sucked up and used to build this hierarchy where some people raised the food, and other people were able to sit in the temples or the banks or wherever, but to finance this hierarchical society. And so that, for 8,000 years, has been how this thing has been continuing. Now and most people don't understand the natural history of the planet. Normally, the living things are below the threshold of consciousness of civilized people.
Right.
They don't have really any interest in what has happened to the living things. But what has happened, for example, 1/2 of China was once a vast temperate zone forest, all gone now. The Indus Valley, a semi-arid desert system, all gone. The devastation in Iraq, huge, where Babylon sets. 1/3 of the arable land in Iraq cannot now be used because it's still so salinized from Babylonian irrigation.
Right. So you're saying that I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're saying that all of this devastation is from almost ancient history. This isn't even to speak of what we're doing now. This is just the destruction that was wrought on the world by early civilization.
Absolutely. But modern humans need to understand that they're at the end of an 8,000-year-old history, and this is real stuff. What people don't understand is that the mouth of the Tigris-Euphrates rivers has extended itself 185 miles into the Gulf with erosion material. North Africa, entire ecosystem destroyed, being a breadbasket for the Roman and Greek empires.
Right.
All gone. Some of the ports in North Africa from which they shipped the goodies, the hides, the meat, the grain, are now 10 and 15 miles from the ocean, all filled in with erosion material. Then the forest of Europe all went down under the onslaught of civilized culture. So this is where we stand, Eric. Now it has spread worldwide. All these people want more, and they're getting it. The rainforest in Indonesia is going down to provide ethanol through oil palm plantations, for example. Now, because of the hierarchical civilization, we now have a system where it exists throughout the planet. 168 countries have central banks now, all connected to the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. Now, these central banks are mostly privately owned, mostly with Rockefeller and Rothschild control. So this is a planetary system that we're involved in, a planetary currency system, and this provides for the control from the top of the monetary system, which then controls all of our lives.
Right.
The dollar bill that we have in our wallets is controlled by the central bank. The central bank controls the value of the dollar in our wallet. That's the kind of control we're looking at.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
No problem. So we're looking at a millennia-long process that has yielded a civilization that gets more and more control as time and technology go forward. That's how I look at it. Because, I mean, the Romans and the Babylonians, they were able to do so much damage, and they didn't even have fossil fuels, or they didn't even have aircraft and vehicles and, hydraulics. And so the scale of destruction that we're wreaking on the earth now is such that if it was unchecked, we could destroy the whole place in a few weeks. And obviously, it's close to unchecked. It seems to me like the destruction of the Amazon, I've been hearing that they're taking out 30-40% a year. It doesn't seem like you can keep that up for very long, but I don't know about those numbers. I just know that we're getting to a point where it can't go on anymore. And I think that's related to the current situation where the global economy is being pretty much by fiat ground to a halt and been told to stop. And I feel like that has got to be related to the fact that there's just really no more. We can't go on like this. This economic system can't continue to maintain the facade of legitimacy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's a preface, Eric. We are not the kind of human beings that existed for 200,000 years of the history of our human family. We are different human beings.
Yeah.
We are not able to perceive the living things around us. That is not part of our reality. In ancient times, we had much more abilities. We had telepathic communication with the plant community, for example. We were able to do remote viewing. We were able to do a whole lot of those psychic things that are considered unusual now, but were in ancient times part of the human constitution. So what has happened is we've been conditioned into a materialistic reality where right now in modern times, our entire reality is furnished by the industrial society. Everything around us is produced by factories, and that produces the reality that we live in. And so what we're involved in is an extremely constricted human mentality to start off with. And so with this narrow vision, people who are conditioned by television news channels and et cetera, it is extremely narrow. Now, what we have is this thing is marching ahead all over the planet. In New Guinea, they're destroying the ecology with mining. Indonesia, in Australia, all the mining and the ecological destruction. It's going on all over the planet because every civilized human being wants more, and because they're caught in this framework, they have to have food, fuel, housing, etc. It all has to be produced by the industrial society. There are very few people who can walk out on the land, such as we did for 200,000 years, and simply live. Our ancient family were incredibly educated, incredibly. They could walk out and build housing, find food, have knowledge of the weather, etc., etc. They knew how to make clothing. They knew how to do hunting, all that sort of stuff. You don't learn that in one classroom session.
Right.
This is entire culture education. And so now we're constricted into the narrow confines of public education, college education, etc., all devoted to the materialist society. But now what we have now, we're sitting on a pile of debt. The entire planet is massively in debt, and the bankers, what here in the United States, there is no more economy as we knew it in the past. the manufacturing, the providing of goods and services is not important. What has happened is that financiers have become the economy.
Mm-hmm.
When the stock market goes up, this is the money system. It is not measuring what is manufactured. The international financial elite has sent the American manufacturing offshore in order to gain that margin of the wage cost. And it will not return until the wage of the American worker gets below the wage of the Chinese worker. It will not return because of the control of the international financial elite.
Yeah.
And so now if you look at Lenin's analysis of the economy, it all goes in a circle. The capitalist grabs 10% profit off the top of the circle, and then the workers get the balance, and they become consumers. But now when there are no factories, no substantial jobs, there won't be any consumption. And that ultimately is the end of the American economy, because there's no coming back. We have sent all the engineering talent, all the manufacturing abilities offshore. We cannot reconstitute that in a few weeks. That cannot happen. And so what we're looking at is the full crash of the American economy without recovery.
Right, and that's going to probably result in Great Depression-like reality for people, or worse, would you say? Because that's how I see it. I see like we haven't even seen how bad it can be when a society that's this disconnected from the land collapses. Because back then, people had places to go. You know, they still had families that owned farms, and that's just so much less the truth now.
Well, some of them did, but old folks have told me about watching freight trains come through their town looking like porcupines with all the hobos sticking out of them. People, thousands and thousands of people wandering the country looking for work, looking for sustenance.
Yeah.
That was 1934. But this depression will be even worse, because the resources that existed in those days do not exist now. The entire northwest of the United States has been clear cut.
Yeah.
Almost all the forests are gone. There's no more natural forest in the northwest. It's all fir tree plantations, and they are young trees. So the point being that the resources have dwindled considerably. The fish in the ocean, for example, and so there's little to recover on.
Yeah, and there's more people too. A lot more people.
What we do have is an organized control system from the top. The planetary surveillance system, the planetary banking system, the planetary communication system. These people control the planet, and they are going to continue to control the planet, depression or no depression. So this is the situation we're in. They are not going to go away. Their massive militaries are not going to go away.
Okay, so this leads me to, when you were talking earlier, you said about how people in modern times don't really know how to live on the land, and we've all lost that cultural knowledge. And what that made me think of was how, when I read your book for the first time, a huge light went on in my head. And it was the realization that you shared through talking about permaculture and eco-villages that were already in existence, the reality that there are some people, not a whole lot, but there are some people who are starting to grasp these problems and who are attempting to build systems that will help people relearn those indigenous natural skills that will help us to survive on this planet without the aid of massive industrial factory production and industrial infrastructure. And so I'm curious if you feel like the people that have been working so hard to set all that up are now going to become much more in demand. In other words, permaculture designers have a hard time finding work as permaculture designers. It's not easy to get someone to pay you to do a consultation or an installation. Whereas I'm wondering if that's going to change now. And is it possible that all of the work that's been done over the decades by people like yourself and so many others to establish a counterculture that rejects the tenets of industrial consumerism and reaches back into the past to create a balanced lifestyle? Do you think that we, on that side of things, can basically turn this around? Is it possible for us to take this as an opportunity to basically reboot everything?
Well, this whole thing is random chance, I believe. We've got to take the chance that we can do it. Now, if you look, let's look at an idealized eco village. They're sitting in a watershed. They've got their permaculture system going. They're restoring the ecology surrounding them and revivifying the living earth.
Yeah.
So here we have a balanced ecological system that can go on forever. Now, we have this small island of organic community, and we have this society collapsing around it. You looked at the ecological footprint computations and understand there is not enough to support this massive population, and it will ultimately go down. Now, our hope is that this small island of ecological health, ecological sanity, will survive past the crash of civilization, and then it would become the basis of the new human culture in the future, in the far future. Now, this is maybe the shot that we have. Otherwise, in the masses of population, the millions, like Mexico City, 27 million people living in the same spot, ain't no way they're going to become sustainable, become self-sufficient, all of them growing their own food, producing their own shelter, getting their own clean water. There is no way that's going to happen. And so without the resources, the petroleum of modern society, they cannot exist, and that will collapse. There is no way to avoid it. If you look at the computations of peak oil, 2-3 years ago, more than 30 countries had already exceeded the production of petroleum, meaning the production of petroleum was going down. They'd hit the maximum in those countries.
Low-hanging fruit's gone.
And so the petroleum is the key value to the entire industrial system. And just on that basis, it's going down. But when 90% of the big fish in the ocean are gone, such as they are today, that means the end. When the topsoil is diminishing so rapidly as we see it in the last 40 years, 30% of the planetary topsoil was eliminated through expansion of cities, population, erosion, etc. Topsoil going down, population going up. Now, even if we had a stable population at this point, it wouldn't make any difference, because every person in the population wants more. And so the consumption would simply increase, even if we stopped the population growth.
Right.
So that's the box. That's the box that we're in. What are we going to do? We've got master gardeners in most of our communities in USA. We have permaculture practitioners wandering around the planet, Africa, Europe, USA, Latin America, and in East Asia. So those people are the seeds of the recovery. Whoever can find these people, get instruction from them, they have a chance of survival.
Right.
I think.
And it's going to take that recognition. I feel like that's really what's missing at this point, because the whole world now knows that we're in an unstable situation. The fears of a long-term shutdown of everything. The economy is definitely not going to do well in that situation. And the reality of facing sudden extreme poverty is hitting everyone in the face with all this. And that, to me, seems like it might well be a wake-up call to where people are going to start taking this more seriously and start thinking, hey, maybe we should invest in some of these things. Maybe it's not just all a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists who are preparing for this kind of scenario. And my hope is that the demand will shift away from government solutions to local grassroots organized solutions, wherein people that we actually know can be involved in these processes, where we transition our society and our basic needs in society away from dependence on all the mega structures and building more local resilient ones. However, it's going to take all the knowledge and all of the experience of all these people. As you said, they're wandering the world, most of them dirt poor. And what I would like to see is a way for those skills and that knowledge that those people have acquired to become available to people who currently still have some capital and can still maybe make some projects happen. It's not too late to build some of these new settlements that so many people I know want to be part of. Now, hopefully, it's going to be, people are going to be a little bit less hesitant to do it. Like, I kind of want to do that, but I got my job and I've got my life. It's like when all that goes away, it's like that the only thing left to do is to try and build a community, or at least make a community work out of what we've already got, be it our neighborhood homes, be it our rural farms, or even in the inner cities, assuming they survive the chaos of things falling apart. There's potential for some people to live there, not 27 million, but, you know, cities can function with permaculture installations, and they can grow some food and they can recycle their water and all of that. And I'm still kind of optimistic, but I guess I feel urgency, like we need to organize. Those of us who are part of the permaculture world need to start getting our heads together at least, and hopefully implementing some programs whereby we can actually offer the services and perhaps even make some money finally as permaculture designers. Perhaps we will be in demand enough now to make it difference out there in the world.
Well, I like your optimism, Eric. If you count up the numbers, people that are involved in permaculture, eco-villages, intentional communities movement, all of that sort of thing, are how much percentage of the population? Maybe half a percent, 1%. It's like the garrison state, the CIA, the secret police. If 3% of us know everything that the CIA is doing, they don't give a damn. There's nothing 3% of the population can do about it. Yeah. And that's our situation also as organic people. None of these people are going to wake up. Now, look back into the Depression, 1932, when people got really hungry, they started to wake up. Now, humans are vastly intelligent and have all kinds of skills and talents. But what it took, hunger and the depths of the Depression to wake people up enough to
Okay, we are recording again. We are back. I think, Bill, your video is gone, but that's okay. We got your picture up on the screen. And can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, now you're back. There we go.
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. And
That's all
right. I've forgotten my train of thought already.
That's okay. You know, we were talking about the numbers is what you started off with, and how there's not enough of us yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Now,
yeah.
some people say, well, let's find an answer for the world's problem. Good luck. There is no answer for the world problem. You can't stuff infinite growth into finite context. It will not work. We, as a human population on this planet, have vastly overshot the ability of the planet to continue to support us in this kind of luxury. So what's going to happen? Clean water. How much clean water exists on this planet? Most of these people are drinking polluted water. You go look at the studies that are done in the East Coast in those big cities. They dump the sewage in the river. It goes down to the next city where they run it through a filtration plant, but it still has all kinds of chemicals and pharmaceutical drugs in the water. It's very difficult to find pure water. Right. I live in a place where I drink spring water every day. My garden is irrigated with spring water. But this is highly unusual. Highly unusual. So here's 7 billion people sitting in top of the world needing these survival items, and they're not going to have them. As the society collapses, there will be less and less ability to purify water, to replace fertility of topsoil with petroleum-based artificial fertilizers, etc. But what I was starting to say, during the depths of the Depression, people woke up. They said, God damn, I ain't got no job. I'm hungry. My relatives are hungry. We got to do something. And they started organizing labor unions. And the CIO began to explode all over the country. And the auto plant sit-ins, all that sort of thing. It was a hell of a fight with the big capitalists. But the unions succeeded, and by the end of World War II, I lived with my family as a young person on the edge of a sawmill cow town. And every male in the neighborhood worked as a laborer or a working class person, could afford to raise a family. None of the wives worked at all, and they could buy a new car every 2-3 years. Now that was the golden age, the early 1950s. And then Taft-Hartley was passed by the ruling class, passed Taft-Hartley law, began to destroy the unions. And so now we sit in a situation where man and wife are working. There's not enough income to support people in the standard that we used to have. Right. So, but the point being that the masses would not wake up until they really got hungry. Right. Now, that is what we're looking at in the near future. When this economy crashes worldwide, it's going to be hell to pay, and people are going to say, look around and say, what are we going to do? And the first thing that we're going to do is say, we got to have food. So let's get some garden seeds and let's get a shovel. And at that point, all the people that are skilled in raising food, in gardening, permaculture, eco-village, whatever, are going to be the leaders in the neighborhood societies.
Absolutely.
There won't be enough luxury to have a whole lot of administrative classes over the top of us, because they won't be able to afford to support that upper class and
Right.
that administrative class. So the neighborhood people are going to be the basis of society, I believe.
That's good news. That's the direction I would like to see it go, because what are those administrative people really doing for us anyway? It's a pretty top-heavy system that exists to serve itself, and it essentially extracts all its wealth, just the way early civilizations extract their wealth from the fertility of the earth. The sort of assembly class is what I call them, the lawyers and the bureaucrats and the people who are essentially making their living over just moving information and moving funds around. Basically, they exist at our expense. They're extracting fertility from the real production that goes on in the world and in the lives of people who actually do something useful. And what I would like to use this as an opportunity to say to my listeners is, let this be a wake-up call to us all. We don't need to panic, but we need to act urgently to secure local food production and to secure the things we need for ourselves, be it clean water, be it energy, be it various kinds of goods that are produced. There are alternatives. We don't just have to get things from trucks. In the earlier days, in the past, people made most of what they used at home, or at least it was made locally. And that's something that we can recreate in a sort of, it's almost like scaling it back and maintaining some of the elements of modern civilization that we enjoy. I think we can maintain them, but we can also scale back and reinstitute old things, like when people used to, shell beans and husk corn and sing songs and go out and harvest grain together and just be together as a community. It became, in the 20th century, almost something that people were ashamed of, or they didn't, it was looked down upon socially. It's like, oh, that's just farming. The cool thing now is to live in the cities and have money. And it became almost a cultural image that the successful modern American wasn't out there shoveling any compost. But I think we need to reverse that and say, no, we are now in a position where we have to get back to the land a little bit. And we can do it in our own neighborhoods. There's a lot of unused space that is just sitting with lawns. And of course, there's logistical issues as to how to get all that productive and organize that, but that's up to us to do locally. We can't make one rule that applies to everybody. Everyone has to sort of come up with their own system, but it's going to take communication with our neighbors and, involvement at the community. Hiding in our homes for the next year and a half is not a good idea. At least that's how I feel about it.
That sounds right to me, Eric. But there will be social chaos,
right?
And this is a factor we have to think about. Somebody's going to be coming into our garden, stealing the turnips or something like
that.
But
yeah, I mean, that's another issue. Go ahead.
Excuse me. This maneuver is not going to happen by July of this year. This transition is going to take a few years. So we're going to have time to work this out. But in the Depression in the 1930s, here where I live, the locals tell me all of the elk herds were wiped out because that was the only form of sustenance people had in the Depression. And they had to return back to the pioneer lifestyle because they were so ignorant of humanity on the planet, such as our 200,000 years, they were not able to go back to what the local native people had as a lifestyle. They did not know the plants to eat. They didn't, all of that business. They didn't know how to build shelter. So the best they could do was revert to pioneer lifestyle.
That brings up a good point of for people now that are worried about food security, it's not just about growing food. It's about learning what wild foods are growing near you. And in some places, there might not be many. But in most places in this country, there's a lot of food that people just don't think of as food, or they may have too much entitlement to want to eat it, like dandelions and things like that. But knowledge of those foods, experience going out and wild crafting them, that could be life-saving knowledge at this point. And we still have the internet. We still have people who can teach you that, and there's still access to that knowledge. So I recommend that people get on it now, because we don't know how much longer we're going to have all of these things that we enjoy, such as ability to drive around in cars or use the internet and stuff like that. So it's a good time to start learning our local indigenous foods and getting together with people to go out and collect them.
Yes. Well, the Native Americans found out after they got confined to the concentration camp reservations that they couldn't really be successful foraging like they had previously, because millions of invaders had come in and wiped out the big elk herds, the big deer herds, the mountain sheep, all of that, and destroyed the land through overgrazing, so there weren't the plants that they used to eat. But now there are some, of course, that still exist, edible plants. For example, in my garden, the best production I have is weeds. Weeds are more nutritious than garden plants, basically. If you check the purslane, for example, has more nutrition than anything else in the garden.
Right,
I have
it grows
purslane.
by itself.
I have sow thistle. I have goosefoot. I have amaranth. And on and on. Weeds that I eat in my garden, that are more nutritious than the cabbages that I grow. So there are alternatives, and there are ways that you can continue to feed yourself, but you cannot live on goosefoot or sow thistle or amaranth on plant-based material. The native people used corn as the basic protein source. In anthropology says that the women provided 70% of the food for forager hunters through plant-based diets. Now, the women are not yet back in power, but soon it will happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're facing a world in which we don't need conquerors anymore. We need peacemakers, and we need people who can establish relationships well, because relationships, I think, are going to be one of the most valuable things in these coming times. It's not just about having the biggest stash of food and guns. It's about being able to make peaceful relations with our neighbors and make deals and negotiate and things like that. And matriocentric societies that are more connected in the personal relationship way, I think, have a much better chance. And I think that was what we already see in the sort of alternative society movement. When I'm speaking of permaculture culture, it's not a really well-defined thing, but what I see is that it is largely feminine. Even if it's a lot of men in the field, the interactions, the style of it all is more nurturing and less aggressive. And that's a somewhat vague way to describe it, but I feel that is the answer, is that we need to sort of restore the balance of the masculine and feminine, and we need to have more social structures that are based on that relationship, consensus-oriented process. Well, Bill, I don't know how much time. I think we're running out of time. I don't want this to get too long, but I definitely want to do this again sometime now that we figured out how to do it. And then, also I'd like to give you a chance to leave with some parting comments, and then I'll tell people where they can find your book, and we can go back to enjoying our beautiful spring day.
Sounds very good. Sounds very good. So the basic thing is our humanity has been altered. We live in a materialist society. We no longer have a relationship to living things. That relationship begins with the intelligence of the heart. As you know, there is a mass of nerves on the back of the heart that is the actual intelligence of the heart. This is the emotional body. This is the feeling body. And this is the way that people connect with other living things, trees, plants, etc. That has to be emphasized. We live in a patriarchal society, unfortunately, and that has been cut off because we live in the intellectual world. Everything is defined intellectually. We have to restore our humanity by restoring the intelligence of our heart. How about that?
I think that's great advice, and I hope that we can do that. I hope that this will be a good wake-up call for us all. And Bill, do you still have a website? Would you tell us where people can find your book? Because I bought I got mine a long time ago. I don't know what this current situation is.
Amazon. It's an old book, so both Garden Planet and Final Empire can be found on Amazon, and that's about the only place that you can find to order it.
Well, I'm glad they are available on Amazon. So Final Empire, The Collapse of Civilization is the book, and there's also Garden Planet, which I didn't mention, but it's it's more or less the same thesis, but it's more condensed, and I think it's easier for people who don't have the time to read all of the details, because Final Empire is very detailed, so many notes and such a long bibliography. You did a lot of research on that one, and I highly recommend it for people who want to understand the situation. So anyway, it's been great talking with you, Bill, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Very good, Eric. Hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you too.